Greetings, and welcome to the official podcast of CallUponTheLord.com. My name's Corey Wickington, and this is episode 15. This week we are on week 15 of the great story. We're going to be covering Elijah and Elisha today. So basically the prophets that the Lord sent into the northern kingdom. So before we get started with that, I'd like to apologize because I still have a cold. You might notice that in my weekly podcast, I missed last week. That's because I really don't know what happened to last week. So this is the scenario for you. Thursday, I was working on the Bible study, doing my research, trying to get everything together for it, and I was a little bit behind where I needed to be anyway. Well, something came up, ended up to where I wasn't able to finish the Bible study. I thought, well, I'll just push that off until Friday. Because, well, past couple weeks I've been doing this on Friday anyway, so it hasn't been that big of a deal. Except Friday, I came down with the plague or something. I don't know what it was. Some type of flu, sinus infection. Regardless, I've been out of it for about the past week. So, I'm here today. I still got a little bit of a cold. You might hear it a little bit in my voice. I apologize for that. It might clear my throat a little bit more than normal. Hopefully nothing else, but I hope that you bear with me and that we can get through this. I haven't tried talking for an hour straight since I came down with this. I hope my throat holds up through it. So, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? The great story. And if you have not done so already, I suggest you go to the website. It's www.CallUponTheLord.com. Under the Bible Studies section, Corey Wickington, The Great Story. You'll find all the entries for all of our past episodes. You also find this study guide that I teach from. I upload those every week, so you can kind of follow along, see what I'm going to say, look at some of the notes that I've made. Please go there, obtain your copy so you can follow along. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us on Facebook at facebook.com/CallUponTheLord, or you can just go to the webpage and use our contact form. So, anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So, last week we talked about the son of Solomon. I guess that was 2 weeks ago. We talked about the son of Solomon, about how the kingdom was taken away from him. It wasn't taken away from Solomon, even though it was Solomon's sin that kind of got Israel into the boat that they were in, but rather it was taken away from Solomon's son. 11 tribes went into the northern kingdom. Well, 10 tribes really went to the northern kingdom, and then Judah remained loyal to the line of David. So as we start week 15, that's where we're at right now. We have the northern kingdom, which is called Israel, and the southern kingdom, which is called Judah. So unfortunately, here we really start back. Well, I guess we continue on their downward spiral. We kind of started again with Solomon, with the false worship systems being brought into Israel. Now we're kind of continuing on with that in the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom both. They both have their kings, and as you read down through the text in the Bible, you see it says, and this king was, did evil in the sight of God, and he was worse than the king before him, and it's just a pattern all the way down through there. The northern kingdom, they didn't even have a good king. Now, the southern kingdom, they had a couple of good kings like Josiah that was basically staved off destruction a little bit longer because he turned the people back toward God, and then his son comes along and messes the whole thing up again. But the northern kingdom, they just didn't have that. They just had a bunch of evil kings up there. But the Lord basically treated them the same way. He sent prophets into the land to teach them, these are the laws of God. This is what you're doing that's wrong. Turn away from your evil ways. Turn back to God, and I will keep the hedge of protection around you if you don't, bad things are going to happen. So we start off here, we're starting in the northern kingdom. Now, the king that we're looking at in particular today is King Ahab. He started his reign in 874. And this is who Elijah and Elisha were basically sent to deal with, was this King Ahab. King Ahab, he took a wife. His wife's name was Jezebel. Jezebel, of course, is identified with all kinds of false religious systems. Even in Revelation 2:20, maybe, it talks about Jezebel and how that's the false religions of the world. So, what really made this part in history really bad was when King Ahab married Jezebel. They decided, oh, well, we need to build an altar to Baal. So that's what they did. In Samaria, they had a temple of Baal, and they built a nice altar to him, and it was kind of like the official sanctioning of Baal. I mean, before that time, there were other false religious systems. There were even some, altars around and such, but this is really like the first official sanctioning of, we are now worshiping Baal. So, just a side note, Baal means Lord, husband, or owner. Baal was worshipped by the Canaanites. He was known as a storm god. He basically was in charge of the rain and fertility of the earth. So, during this period, God, of course, he sent his prophets into the land to preach not the gospel, but preach the word of God and the commandments. And this period right here, the period of Elijah and Elisha, this is the mark of the second period of miracles in the Bible. The first period of miracles, of major miracles that is, was with Moses. Of course, Moses did all kinds of miracles, from parting the Red Sea to hitting a rock and water coming out of it, all kinds of things. It was the first set of miracles in the Bible. The second major occurrence of miracles happened around the time of Elijah and Elisha. And of course, the third set happened with Jesus and the disciples and apostles. So, that's not to say there aren't other miracles in the Bible. This is just the where there's a big amount of them, a big section of them all together, and performed by one person. So, Elijah, we get introduced to him in the 17th chapter of the book of 1 Kings. It says in 1 Kings 17:1 says, "Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, As the Lord the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word." Okay, so when Elijah comes on the scene, the first thing he does is he meets with the king and says, here's what the Lord says. There's not going to be any rain until I say that there's going to be rain. Now it says in James 5:17 in the New Testament says that Elijah prayed fervently for there not to be any rain. So it wasn't just that he was just the messenger of God here. I mean, he was praying fervently that the Lord would continue to do this. Elijah, by the way, Elijah means Yahweh is my God. So after Elijah told the king this, the Lord told him, go and hide, go to the brook of Cherith, and there you'll receive your water from the brook, because there's going to be a drought in the land, everything's going to die. You'll receive your water from this brook, and I will send ravens to provide you with food. So the Lord basically took care of Elijah through this whole episode here. Now for Ahab's part, Ahab didn't believe that Elijah was the cause of this. And I guess this makes sense when you look at the world today, where people just kind of twist things, and sometimes they make the exact opposite of the truth sound, feasible. And that's kind of what's happening here. Elijah came out and told Ahab the Lord's going to shut off the rain. And Ahab, he decides, well, it's not the Lord that did this. It's not Elijah that did this. It's Baal. Because Baal is the storm god. Baal's in charge of the rain. He's in charge of the fertility of the ground. If it's not raining, Baal must be causing this. So the reason why it must not be raining is because Elijah is blaspheming against Baal. So you see how this all twisted around in Ahab's brain is completely the opposite of what Elijah told him and what he should have known to be the truth. But he has this completely twisted around in his brain that is something completely different. So, Ahab's going to have a little bit of an awakening here. Also, during this period, Jezebel, of course we talked about her being symbolic of all the false religions, she was rounding up all the prophets of the Lord and having them executed. We find that in 1 Kings 18:4. So she was definitely not a friend to Elijah. Matter of fact, she was quite the enemy. And it was basically because of her that all these bad things were happening. It says that she has 850 prophets, 450 of Baal and 400 of Asherah that were eating at her table. So that's kind of where Jezebel's falling here. As for Elijah, after he had spent some time at the brook of Cherith, he decided, the Lord came to him and said, I want you to go into the town of Zarephath and stay with a widow that's there, and she'll take care of you. So I want to read a little section from that. I'm going to read 1 Kings 17, 13 through 15. It talks about this a little bit. It's about God making a way here. 1 Kings 17, 13 through 15. There's a lot of teens in there. It says, And Elijah said to her, Do not fear. Go and do as you have said. But first make me a little cake. Make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterward make something for yourself and for your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be emptied, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. And she went and did as Elijah said, and she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, nor did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord that he had spoke by Elijah. So we're going to see this a couple of times. I mean, in the New Testament, we see something similar to this happen, where Jesus feeds the 3,000, the 5,000, or he takes bread and fish, breaks them, puts them into baskets, and then after they pass out all the food has multiplied to such a point where they fill like 12 baskets of food. And this is something that's very similar that's happening. The lady tells Elijah, look, all I have is a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil. I don't have enough to take care of you. And Elijah says, don't worry about it. Trust in the Lord. You go make your food, and your flour will not be spent, and your oil will not be spent until the rains comes. Basically, until Elijah leaves, you're going to have flour and oil to do with what you will. So that's basically what happened. I mean, it says they eat for many days out of the little pittance of food and oil that they had. So while Elijah was staying with her, and this is another one of the miracles that Elijah performed, while he was staying with her, her son grew ill, and he died. Now, you got to understand, this is a very serious thing, because she's a widow anyway. The husband's gone. And we talked last week about how women in this society were identified with the men, the patriarchs of their family. So her husband was dead, so now she was no longer the wife of somebody, she was the mother of her son. Well, now her son's died, so she's basically, she's left alone, she's desolate, she's a widow without any chance of, doing anything, really. So she's having a really hard time with this, and she basically accuses Elijah and says, "Look, is this why you came here, to take my son away from me?" Elijah takes compassion on her, and this happens in 1 Kings 17:19 through 24. Let's go ahead and read that. It says, "And he said to her, 'Give me your son.' And he took him from her arms and carried him up into the upper chambers where he lodged, and laid him on his own bed. And he cried to the Lord, 'O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourn, by killing her son?' Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and cried to the Lord, 'O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again.' And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah, and the life of the child came into him again, and he revived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper chamber into the house, and delivered him to his mother. And Elijah said, 'See, your son lives.' And the woman said to Elijah, 'Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord is in your mouth. In your mouth is truth.'" So what we have is, Elijah takes compassion on her. I mean, he goes before the Lord and says, "Lord, I've imposed on this woman. She's been taking care of me. Don't take her son from her." And he petitions the Lord, and the Lord listens to him, and he's able to resurrect the child from the dead and give him back to his mother. So not only was the child's life restored, but the woman's faith as well is restored, because she now sees, yes, this is a man of God, and what he says is the truth, because who else is going to be able to raise people from the dead if not the Lord? Moving right along. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And it's because it's one of the only places in the Bible where we get a story that is dripping with sarcasm. And I just love it. It's the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal. So I'm going to read quite a bit here. I think I have 21 verses to read. So hopefully my voice is able to stand up through that. But I think it's important that we hear the entire story so we can kind of see how the Lord was working here. But basically what happened was Elijah, he leaves the widow's house, and he comes before the king of Ahab. As soon as the king of Ahab sees him, he says, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" He calls Elijah the troubler of Israel. The reason why he does that is because, you remember why we talked earlier, Ahab doesn't believe that the Lord and Elijah is the ones that are restraining the rain. He believes that it's the blasphemies of Elijah that is causing Baal to withhold the rain. So he's calling Elijah the troubler of Israel. It's like, it's your fault. You're blaspheming. It's causing trouble in the land. And Elijah, he says, "Look, it's not me. It's because of you and your father's house, who have turned away from the commandments of God, who have served this foreign god. You are the ones that are causing this." So we have a challenge here that Elijah issues. He basically asks for 450 of the prophets of Baal to be gathered at Mount Carmel, and they're going to have a little showdown. And this story takes place in 1 Kings 18:20 through 40. So let's go ahead and look at that. Like I said, this is a nice long story, so bear with me here. And so it goes. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping between 2 different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to the people, "I, even I only, am left, a prophet of the Lord. but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut it into pieces, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire to it. And then you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, It is well spoken. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, Choose for yourself 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it. And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep, and he must be awakened. And they cried aloud, and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances, until the blood gushed upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice. No one answered them, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, Come near to me. And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be your name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar, as great as would contain 2 seah of seeds. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. And he said, Fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. Do it a 2nd time. And they did it a 2nd time. And he said, Do it a 3rd time. They did it a 3rd time. And the water ran around the altar, and filled the trench also with water. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said to them, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And Elijah said to them, Seize the prophets of Baal, let none of them escape. And they seized them. And Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon, and slaughtered them there. So there's a lot of things going on there. And I just love that story. It shows that God is the one that's in control. So let's kind of break down that story, see what happened there. First off, we talked, and just a little bit before this section, it talks about there being 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. Now, only the prophets of Baal were present here, so there were 450 men that were prophets against the one singular prophet of God. Elijah set this up very cleverly. First off, he allowed the people, the prophets of Baal, to go first. He allowed them to choose the bull. Basically, he gave them every advantage. You choose the bull, you can go first. 450 versus 1. Go. So, they prepared the sacrifice the way they wanted to do it, without any interference. And Elijah gave them as long as they needed. Said they cried out from morning until noon, and Baal never answered. At noon, and this is the part I like, Elijah started mocking them. Where is he? Surely Baal, he's a god. He must just be away thinking, or maybe he's in the bathroom. You know, maybe he's asleep or on a journey. Do you have to wake him up? He just mocks them over and over. It's kind of reinforces his point with the people of Israel in a sarcastic tone, because he's basically throwing this all back at them that, you know, if he's a god, you know, is he not there always? I mean, do you have to wake this being up, or, you know, how do you get his attention? Maybe you cry louder. You know, he basically let them do everything they wanted to do. They started cutting themselves, which was part of their religion, was, you know, lancing themselves, so they were basically bleeding all over the place when they were done with this. And nothing happened. And Elijah, he just, okay, it's my turn. So he takes the bull, he prepares it accordingly. Very meticulously, he takes 12 stones that are symbolic of the 12 tribes and places them, builds this altar up. And he goes a step further. Now, this is not something that he had imposed on the people of the prophets of Baal. This is something that he did further. He said, fill up 4 jars of water. Douse this altar. And they poured water all over the altar. And they did that 3 times. Now, at this point, there's no way this thing's burning. I mean, it's soaked in water. I mean, the sacrifice that he's prepared, I mean, it's got water all through it. So there's water. He built a trench around his altar, and there's water filling this trench up. I mean, this thing is soaked. There's no way, you know, you try to take a match to this or a torch or whatever to light it. It's not going to happen. But he steps back and says, Lord, I've done this for you. Show these people your power. And what does the Lord do? Fire from heaven consumes the altar, consumes the wood, the sacrifice, the stones. It says the dust is you know, destroyed, and all the water that was there is licked up and devoured. So the Lord goes above and beyond and just in his fashion, in the way that only he can. He performs that miracle, and the people of Israel look. It's like, oh wow, Lord really, you know, really showed up here, and they bow down. They, you know, give thanks and say, you know, the Lord, He is God. Well, you can imagine how the prophets of Baal are feeling. I mean, they've been out there, they've been dancing around trying to get Baal to do something. Nothing's happening. And Elijah turns to them and says, seize them! And the children of Israel, they go over and, you know, grab the prophets of Baal, because declaring yourself a prophet of God or of Baal, that was a very serious thing. And if you were found out not to be a prophet, Old Testament law said you died. And that's what happened here. All 450 of them were slain at the, what's it, Kishon? I think is what it was. The brook of Kishon. Yep. So, after those events, after that story there, the drought came to an end. Of course, what also happened was Jezebel was furious, because, you know, her prophets had just been killed, and she declared that she was going to kill Elijah for what he had done. So Elijah takes off. He flees. Now, as far as Jezebel goes, Elijah comes back a little bit later on, and he prophesies, and he says, what is it? It says in 1 Kings 21:13, it says, and of Jezebel the Lord also said, the dogs shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezreel. Now that event actually took place in 2 Kings 9:30-34, where, you know, that's how she was killed. I think she was struck by something, and then the dogs actually came and ate her. So Jezebel got what was coming to her in the end. So Elijah, you know, he's going around the countryside, and he's prophesying for God. He's teaching the commandments and such. He comes upon Elisha. So Elijah was first, and then Elisha was his servant. They journeyed together. We won't actually cover, basically what they did. But basically, it came time for Elijah to be done. His race was finished. He was ready to go and be with the Lord. So it says they came to the Jordan River, and Elijah, he took off his mantle, and he struck the Jordan River with his mantle, and the river parted. I mean, this is kind of symbolic of Moses almost, right? I mean, the river parted, and they walked across on dry ground. When they got to the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, "What can I do for you? My time's short here. What can I do for you? Make a request before I leave. What do you want?" And Elisha said, "I want a double portion of your spirit." It's a weird thing to ask for. I mean, it kind of sounds like Elisha's being greedy here. He's like, I want to be able to do twice as much as you've done. That's really not what's going on here, though. What Elisha is asking for is Elijah's blessing. We talked about this a long time back, where the eldest son of whatever patriarch, he would receive a double portion as opposed to any other child. And that's what Elisha was asking for. He was asking for Elijah's blessing. He was asking for that double portion that would be given to the eldest son. Of course, what's Elijah's response here? He says, that's a difficult thing, because he knows that it's not really something that he can give. His power is given to him by God, and only God can give that power. So Elijah tells him, if you see me when I'm taken, then you will have your answer, and the Lord will bless you. If you don't, well, you're not getting anything. It's basically a test for Elisha, to let him know this is your sign. If you see me go, then the Lord has granted your request. Well, what happens right there in the next section? It talks about chariots of fire and horsemen of fire coming down from heaven, taking Elijah up in a whirlwind and going back up, and Elisha witnesses the whole thing. So he knows that the Lord has given him the blessing. So to confirm that, though, it says he picks up Elijah's mantle, goes back to the Jordan, rolls it up, and he says, where are you, O Lord God? And he smacks the Jordan River with the mantle. Jordan again parts, and he walks across on dry land. And everybody around that saw it says, the spirit of Elijah is now on him. So he received the spirit of Elijah. Now, as far as Elisha goes, we're not going to talk about him in his depth as what we did Elijah, mainly because we're just running out of time here. But the miracles that Elisha had, according to the Bible at least, there were twice as many miracles recorded for Elisha as opposed to Elijah. I think there were 14 for Elijah and 28 for Elisha. I'm going to get these names confused. I know I am. Some miracles he repeated that Elijah had done. For instance, resurrections. There was one resurrection. He resurrected the Shunammite's son by laying on him and blowing into his mouth. That happened in 2 Kings 4:34. Second resurrection, this was a little bit different than what Elijah had done, but someone touched Elisha's bones, and the man was resurrected as soon as he touched the bones. Now, there was a more of like the never-emptying jar of oil. as we saw before with the flour and the oil, something similar happened where a widow had come to Elisha and said, I need money, I have nothing. Can you help me? And she said, all I have is this jar of oil. And he said, go borrow all the containers that you possibly can. Make sure that you borrow as many as you can. Take them into your house and then start pouring oil out of your jar. And she did. She borrowed containers from all of her friends and family, took them into her house, and said she filled every container that she had in her house. And the jar did not run out of oil until she had filled everything in there. So it's basically, again, that never-ending jar. The same miracle that Elijah performed, the same miracle that Jesus would perform in the future, where they were basically, it was created for them. So, other things that Elisha did, he wasn't necessarily all that nice of a person sometimes. There was a story of 42 youths that were making fun of him because he was bald. And he caused 2 she-bears to come out and maul them and kill them. That happened in 2 Kings 2:24. There's a story about how he cleansed a bowl of soup in 2 Kings. There was poison in it from the ingredients. 2 Kings 4:41. He blinded the Syrian army in 2 Kings 6:20. And he had several prophecies and such that were future stuff that was fulfilled in his lifetime. So, Elisha had the spirit of Elijah, is what the point here is. I mean, it shows with all the miracles that he did, he basically carried on the prophecies and the word of God to the people in place of Elijah, and continued to show them, this is who God is, this is his commandments, follow him, and that was his job. Now we're going to talk about more prophetic things. The Elijah and his spirit, because Elijah, the spirit of Elijah, is prophesied to come back before the Messiah. In Malachi 4:5 it says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. So the people understand, the Jews understand mainly here, that Elijah is going to come back before the Lord comes, before the Messiah comes. That Elijah is going to be there. Now, there's a debate on whether it's actually going to be Elijah or whether it's somebody like Elijah, the spirit of Elijah. And we have that debate because, Matthew 11:7-14, Jesus is talking about John the Baptist, about how John was out there. He was the voice calling in the wilderness, and the people were going out to see the prophet. And Jesus tells them, he says, if you had just accepted him, or accepted me as the Messiah, he would have been that Elijah. So John the Baptist would have had the spirit of Elijah. He would have been the one crying in the wilderness, letting them know, making the way of the Lord straight. He would have been out there, proclaiming that the Messiah was coming, but they rejected Jesus, so John the Baptist was not Elijah. Now, we also have future depictions of Elijah in the tribulation period, where the 2 witnesses come to Israel. I guess before we get to that, we have Moses and Elijah appearing on the Mount of Transfiguration. They were actually ministering to Jesus. And then the future, of course, we have the 2 witnesses in Revelation 11:1-3. One of those 2 is likely to be Elijah. The other one's probably going to be Moses. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why most commentators will say that, is because of Revelation 11:6. It talks about they have the power to shut the sky, that no rain may fall during the days of their prophesying. And they have the power over the waters to turn them to blood, and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they desire. Well, who were the 2 biblical figures that were able to do this? Elijah shut up the sky, and Moses caused the plagues and turned the water to blood. Those were the plagues of Egypt. So either Elijah and Moses will come back in person, at the end times, at the Revelation period, they'll be the two witnesses, or the two witnesses will have their spirits, basically, then be able to do the same things that they did. So Elijah and Elisha were very important characters. They tried to get the northern kingdom to turn back to God. And we see here that even in the future, Elijah continues to be a very important character, as he or his spirit will return prior to the return of the Messiah. So, what lessons do we learn from this story? We're going to kind of wrap this up here. First lesson is, no matter how bad it gets, the Lord preserves at least a remnant to serve and honor Him. You are not alone. So, during the story of Elijah, we have Obadiah coming and telling Elijah that he himself had hidden 100 prophets of the Lord away because Jezebel was killing everybody. Elijah goes to God and says, Lord, I'm the only one left. And God says, don't worry about it. You're not the only one left. There are 7,000 others that have not bent their knee to Baal or kissed him. You're not alone. I will keep my remnant. And I think that's a good thing to kind of think about. As we're going out into the world and doing things, we're not alone. I mean, there are other Christians around us. Even when we think that the entire world is in chaos and doing all manner of evil, and, well, it is, frankly, there are still Christians out there. There are still people that serve the Lord, still people that love God, that are still working as hard as what you and I are to proclaim the Word, to show that God is great and that He's the one that deserves our worship, and He alone is God. So just remember that next time that you're thinking that you're alone in this world and that no one else can help you. God has His people in the right places to do the things that He wishes to accomplish. Now, the world chooses to turn their ways back toward Him. The Lord will welcome them back. That's what He does. But we know from reading the book of Revelation that things are bound to get worse. So stay faithful and be one of this remnant like we see here in the story of Elijah. Second thing is, God sends His messengers to preach the word. Some will listen, others will not, and eventually judgment will fall on the unbelievers. Well, that's what happens in the book of Revelation. Judgment falls on the unbelievers. So stay loyal to the Lord, and He will be with you through the end. Alright, so I think that takes us to the end of our story for the week. Next week we're going to talk about more of the downward spiral, how many of the kings did evil in the sight of the Lord. The week after that, week 17, we actually talk about the invasions, how the northern kingdom fell, how the southern kingdom fell. And then week 18, we get into talking about Daniel. So, a lot of good things coming up. I hope you will join us back here for then. Until then, I hope that you keep studying, keep reading, and keep praying, because that's about the best thing that you can do. So, join us back here next time. Hopefully we'll be back next Thursday, maybe next Friday. But God bless you all, and you folks have a good week.